Rerun was one of our favorite characters because we could animate those crazy rides on the back of his mother's bicycle, and he was very independent of the other kids, and he kind of stood alone as a star.
Good grief.
Rerun is fun because he's unabashed. There's nothing holding him back. He's unafraid. That may be because he hasn't really learned enough about the world to be afraid of it, but he'll tell you what's on his mind.
Are you asking for my opinion?
He articulates his feelings and he articulates his needs. I mean, he's right there in ways that I think, adults sometimes wish kids could be that, aware of what's going on because they'd be a lot easier to take care of.
Schultz saw him as being a crazy character in some ways because of his wild creativity, but he was also in some ways the most normal. You can define the characters in Peanuts by the things they want and do not get.
You have the greatest dog in all the world.
We laughingly say among ourselves that Rerun is the only normal kid in the comic strip, that all he wants is a bicycle and a dog.
Gee, Mom! Dogs are so much fun. Can we please get one for Christmas?
It's not asking for the love of somebody who doesn't want you. It's not asking to win a lot of baseball games where you're not a good ball player. A dog, a bicycle.
One of the great strengths of the Charlie Brown comic strip was that Charles Schultz would constantly bring in new characters. Woodstock, Peppermint Patty, which would enlarge the repertory company, if you will, both in the comic strip and for our television shows. And when Linus and Lucy had a little baby brother, Rerun, that was great for us too, because we could put Rerun on the back of his mother's bicycle and have him go through these terrifying rides, and it just made great animation.
The strips that introduced the concept of Rerun into the series was in 1972, in fact, right around Mother's Day. Lucy had kicked Linus out of the house. She was tired of dealing with him. He was going and living with Snoopy. He was hanging out at the doghouse. At one point, is asked, hey, why does Lucy's mother allow this to happen? And it turns out she's in the hospital. Why is she in the hospital? Suddenly we find out Lucy has a baby brother, and she is mad because she finally got rid of the one baby brother, and now she's got another baby brother coming in.
It was interesting when Charles Schultz brought Rerun into the comic strip that it didn't really affect Linus and Lucy, his brother and sister, that much because he kind of stands alone.
He's in touch with his loneliness, which is, easier said than done. A lot of times we can touch that briefly, but then we go and defend ourselves by denigrating somebody or acting out in some way. But he stays pretty in touch with the fact that he's lonely and he wants to play and he keeps issuing invitations. And it's really instructive in terms of a model for how we should all function.
I guess I'll try to play by myself.
Rerun also looks a lot like Linus. He looks a lot like the Van Pelt family in general. The Van Pelts have their own head shape. Charlie Brown and Sally have perfectly round heads. Rerun, Linus, and Lucy all have what I call the guitar body shape head. It looks like an electric guitar, but if you just saw a picture of Rerun and didn't know for sure it was Rerun, often you might actually think it was Linus.
I had a hard time distinguishing Rerun from Linus, unless he was on the back of the bicycle. Then you knew it was Rerun because, of course, he was small enough to be on the back of a bicycle. But I remember once saying to Sparky, I never know whether it's Rerun or Linus. And he said, Rerun wears the overalls.
Why me? I'm nobody. I don't even have a dog.
I remember Sparky saying once to me, I wish I'd never thought of Rerun. And I asked why, and he said, well, I can't think of enough things for him to do.
He tried introducing various characters into the strip at various times, and if they didn't work out, they just stopped appearing. But he'd introduced another Van Pelt child, and you can't just get rid of one of them. You can't have there suddenly be only two Van Pelt kids. So there's a lot of years when Rerun wasn't being used that often.
If you go through the strip, you'll discover that he brings Rerun in maybe every 6 months at first, in those early years, until the 80s and the 90s, and then he kind of picked up again. And in looking through the strips, I thought that was because he had grandchildren then.
However, you also get the sense that, to some degree, Schultz was using Rerun as his own stand-in there. Rerun wanted to be a cartoonist. And he was a very creative soul, most commonly seen by whatever he was drawing in class, which was never what he was supposed to draw. So you get the feeling that Schultz may have been, in his old years, using the youngest character in the cast as his own stand-in.
Oh no! It's Bee of the Bee Day! Oh no!
I think the back of the bicycle came from me talking about my daughter. I wasn't that good a bike rider, and she'd lean around me and my whole bike would tip, and I'd get off the bike and she'd fall over on the ground. So he picked up those things and, of course, did his own thing with them. You know, I'm just giving him an idea that then strikes him as funny.
Riding on the back of your mother's bicycle in the winter can be a real experience.
There are so many things in the comic strip that you can see Sparky putting himself into the comic strip. He always said, everything in the comic strip is me. Yeah, it was a theme in Sparky's life. He used to say, I hate goodbyes, and there are too many goodbyes in life and not enough hellos. And he used that directly in a comic strip. That's a direct reflection of Sparky's inner feelings, and it's very poignant to me when I see this now. Again, wouldn't have been so poignant at the time, but looking back, you realize that it was really heartfelt.
Goodbye, Spike. I'll really, really miss you. Don't forget to write.
When Sparky died, we already knew no one was going to draw the strip, and no one was going to write any new dialogue for the characters, which meant that if we wanted any kind of a show, it had to come directly from the comic strip. So Lee then found the theme of Rerun desperately wanting a dog and the tie-in to Christmas. And so Lee really manufactured that entire show directly from the comic strips. And if you see the show and read the comic strips, you can find the parallels.
This little girl in my class was sort of depressed. So I said, why don't we run away to Paris? It was a joke. She thought it was funny, so she told her mother, who told the teacher, who told the principal, and I got fired.
Suspended.
I guess so.
Harassment?
Stupidity.
But, you know, he puts it in the mouth of a kindergarten kid, and then where do you go with that? Well, the strips and the stories just develop, and sometimes he'd say, I don't know how I'm going to end this, you know. So sometimes something like harassment just, you know, pops into your head because you've got to end the story.
Thank goodness Christmas vacation starts tomorrow.
I think what happened then was it gave Lucy a chance to be a little sweeter because she'd become such a shrill voice in the 60s. And I think that was a big thing that people noticed, was that Lucy was suddenly a sweet older sister, just as Charlie Brown, when Sally was born, got to be a caring brother.
When I interview people and I hear about two siblings, oh, they never fight, I think, why? Right? It is so natural. The only reason that somebody wants to push someone around is because they really feel weak, and the only way to get away from that feeling is to be domineering. So really there's insecurity at the core, and Linus has the more obvious expression of insecurity, and I think one of the reasons that we associate him with that is obviously the blanket.
I'm your younger brother, and I don't suck my thumb, and I don't cling to a blanket for security.
There came a time when Rerun realized that he had something on Linus, because here he was, his big brother, but he was still sucking his thumb and dragging his blanket around. And so, and I think that's probably something that you think about too in families, that some kids don't ever let go of some of their babyishness, and I guess that's Linus's Achilles heel, isn't it?
Rerun does what he wants to do and tries to do what he can, and does it with a smile and doesn't have a mean soul towards anybody. And that puts him in contrast with some of the members of his family and other members of the cast. I mean, his big brother is afraid, and his big sister is capable of being mean, although she did mellow out in the later years. And it makes him charming. He's a very, very charming soul.
Rats!
And I think it's just such a mix of interesting characters. You have the great innocence of Rerun. So I think the public identifies with these different characters, especially Charlie Brown. Because like Charlie Brown, all of us, we get up every day, we win some, we lose some, and the next day we come back and try to do better. And I think we respect that struggle that Charlie Brown puts on every day and endures. And I think that's why the characters have been so popular for so long.